We're back. So this is the Gold Derby Slugfest for Best Drama Directing 2016 at the Emmys. I'm here with Amanda and David. Can you read off the nominees, please?
Sure. So we've got Downton Abbey, Episode 9, Michael Engler, Game of Thrones, The Door, Jack Bender, Game of Thrones, Battle of the Bastards, Miguel Sabatnik, Homeland, The Tradition of Hospitality, Leslie Linka Glotter, and Ray Donovan, David Hollander, and The Nick, Steven Soderbergh.
All right. And who are you predicting there?
Homeland. 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 No,
Really?
No. Game of Thrones, of course.
Which one?
Which one? Battle of the Bastards.
Okay.
Of course. I mean,
I was going to say Homeland. Wow, you really dropped a bomb.
well, we have to, number one, we have to make these videos a little bit exciting because the drama categories are a little tame. But, yeah, I just can't, even though there's 2 Game of Thrones episodes here, I can't see Battle of the Bastards losing, especially because, as we were saying in the writing Slugfest, maybe that episode doesn't seem like the episode to reward for writing, but it certainly seems like an episode to reward for directing.
Yeah, I think this is one of those episodes that when it aired, you're like, that guy needs to get his Emmy speech prepared because there's just no way. It's like that tracking episode of True Detective. Regardless of what category they put that show in, you just knew it's gonna win directing. This year, I think it is rallying around it, but I will say, unlike last year, when they had 2, and one of them was the Sansa rape episode, where you're like, that's not happening. I could make the case for The Door. It is a very emotional episode, and what we have learned is that if you are in Game of Thrones and you qualify for the guest category, submit yourself, because I believe the actor who played Hodor, even with 3 words of dialogue, probably could have gotten himself in, because it is a very emotional episode. And we learn something about a character who only says his name, and it's not his name, and we figure this out, and it's very heartbreaking. So I have it in second. I have the second Game of Thrones episode, but I'm going with Battle of the Bastards.
Yeah, The Door is a very popular episode. I mean, The Door and Battle of the Bastards, these are probably 2 of maybe the 5 most popular episodes of the show, for sure. And The Door also has Jack Bender directing, which is a bigger deal in the directing category than the writing category, where there are no names on the ballot. In the directing categories, the names, they matter like a huge deal. Last year, Miguel Sapochnik, he directed the most acclaimed Game of Thrones episode of the season, which was Hard Home. But because he has no name recognition, like he's only been directing TV for the last 5 years, and then you had, Jeremy Podeswa and David Nutter, who were nominated last year. They've been nominated, for years and years on a variety of different HBO shows. Sorry, my point is that the directors, they care about who they're voting for, and Jack Bender was nominated several times for Lost. He was nominated back in the 90s for Northern Exposure. He didn't win for Lost, but maybe he could have with a popular vote, and maybe they'll want to, make up for his past snubs. It helps that this year Miguel Sapochnik has an episode that has a flashy title, Battle of the Bastards, instead of Hard Home, because what the hell is that? So he actually got the nomination this year, which is probably the harder part.
That's the most obvious title in Game of Thrones history, because usually it would have been something like the Flayed Man versus the Dire Wolf or some. No, because I mean, even the Red Wedding, they didn't call it the Red Wedding; they called it the Reigns of Castamere. So that this is like the most. It sounds like a football match or something, and name recognition will only get you so far, because this is Steven Soderbergh's second nomination for The Nick, and it's not a show they're watching, which is why we're really not discussing it. He's in here because of the name recognition, but he won't win on name recognition. Good for them for not nominating Martin Scorsese, because that would have been the only nomination for their show, which now I can't think of that name. It was right on the tip of my tongue.
Final?
Final, yeah. But we've seen people like Quentin Tarantino nominated when he was CSI's like I think CSI had 2 nominations because it's a technical show. They didn't give it to him, so we can't say they're just complete fame junkies where they're just going to go for the most famous person in the category.
Yeah, and I mean, look at Ray Donovan. They nominated this guy, David Hollander, who had never directed the show before, and he got in because he's the showrunner. But their other producing director was actually Colin Buxey, who won for Fargo 2 years ago. So the director's branch is making some strides and not just going for the big names. They didn't go for Martin Scorsese. It's too bad about Steven Soderbergh because I love the way that he directs the Nick. I feel like he has a real sense of space and efficiency, I guess. In terms of who is the best director among this group, it might be him, but maybe he doesn't get a chance to show it with his
the Oscar to prove it. So.
Mm-hmm. I will say about Homeland, the director's branch, they love the show. Especially when it comes to the Directors Guild Awards, it gets in every single year, sometimes gets multiple nominations. At this point, Homeland has been dropped from, editing and writing and supporting actor, but the directors, they just keep nominating it. And this isn't even a season premiere or a season finale. This is just an episode from, the middle of the season, kind of. But they just can't get enough of that Leslie Lincoln Glatter, who has won 2 DGA awards now for both Mad Men and Homeland.
And you can't say based off, and not to disparage people against Game of Thrones, we're not saying that they don't deserve these awards. It's just one of those things where the sweep seems inevitable, especially for this episode, because it was so crazy popular. But you can't say based off who won last year in any of the writing or directing nominations that they weren't at least paying attention to the episodes. And again, we see 5 shows, so being somewhat strategic pays off more than a show nominating 5 or 6 and trying to get their first directing nomination.
Yeah, it's hard to say if Game of Thrones, even if they had vote splitting, I still feel like they have more than twice the support of any of these other nominees. Are they going to go for Downton Abbey, even though they snubbed it last year? Are they going to go for The Nick, which has no other major nominations, or Ray Donovan, which was a total surprise? I'd say Homeland is maybe most likely, but I don't know. This was not last season of Homeland, or it wasn't the first 2 seasons. I think that show's past its prime.
Yeah.
Yeah, and good for Ray Donovan for building in nominations. It's got a sound mixing nomination, 3 acting, a directing. If it keeps this up, we could see it in the series race next year. But
yeah, it really surprised me getting in here. I just totally did not expect. I expected, like we were saying, to see Martin Scorsese for Vinyl, some other big names. So when I saw Ray Donovan, that was a huge surprise. But you're right, it built support in a lot of places this year, and it seems to have a really strong upward trajectory.
And it's a really good episode. This is also Leah Schreiber's episode. It has a really big shootout, and then it has a very emotional aspect to it. So he's not just directing one aspect of something. We get chaos, and then we get this really quiet kind of scene.
All right. Any final thoughts, David?
No, Homeland for the win, but not really.
And you, Amanda?
Go for it. Yeah, I'm going to go with Battle of the Bastards because I don't have a reason not to. I just think even if it wasn't nominated for writing, or it wasn't the favorite to win drama series, I still think Game of Thrones would probably, with this episode, take directing.
Yeah, Game of Thrones won last year, so it's a safe choice. And, it hadn't been always nominated at the Emmys or the Guild for directing, but now it is, and it's really turned a corner. It just won the Directors Guild Award 2 for the first time. I don't see what stops it.